The wait in the July 15th, 1099. The walls of Jerusalem fell.
October 2, 1187.
The walls of Jerusalem fell again.
The same city, the same walls, the same gates. 2 armies, 2 choices. Everything you need to know about what the Crusades actually were is contained in what happened next.
199 begins at the walls of Jerusalem on the 7th of June, 1099. They had marched for 3 years. They had crossed the length of Europe and the breadth of Anatolia. Of the original force, estimates range from 60,000 to 100,000. Roughly 12 to 15,000 remained. They were exhausted, starving, and, by their own documented testimony, consumed by the conviction that God had brought them to this wall for a single purpose.
Inside the walls, the Fatimid governor, Iftikhar ad-Dawla, had expelled the city's Christian population, fearing collaboration. The remaining residents were Muslim and Jewish. The garrison was small, approximately 1,000 Egyptian soldiers. The city's water supply had been fouled deliberately outside the walls to slow the Crusaders' approach.
A man we will call Iftikhar, a merchant, born in Jerusalem, whose family had traded textiles in the city for 3 generations, watched the siege from the roof of his house near the Temple Mount. He had heard the stories from the road, what the Crusaders had done at Antioch, at Ma'ara. At Ma'ara, the chronicles, the Christian chronicles, record that Crusaders had cannibalized the dead. Iftikhar knew what was coming. On the 15th of July, Godfrey of Bouillon's men breached the northeast wall using a siege tower. The city fell within hours. And then the killing began. The account of Raymond d'Aguilera, a chaplain, a priest, an educated clergyman who accompanied the Provençal contingent, describes what happened inside the Temple Mount compound. Men rode in blood up to their knees and bridle reins. Indeed, it was a just and splendid judgment of God. He was praising what he described. The blood was a sign of divine approval. Fulcher of Chartres, another Christian chronicler, recorded that the Crusaders killed approximately 10,000 people in the Temple Mount area alone. Ibn al-Athir, the Muslim historian writing from a later perspective but drawing on contemporary sources, described the killing as systematic. The Muslim population was massacred in the streets and in their homes. Those who sought refuge in the Dome of the Rock were killed inside it. The Al-Aqsa Mosque was turned into a slaughterhouse. The Jewish community of Jerusalem, men, women, children, fled to the main synagogue. The Crusaders locked the doors from the outside, and they set the building on fire. The entire Jewish community of Jerusalem was burned alive in a single documented act. The chaplain who recorded the blood up to the knees considered it the finest day of his life. He was a man of God. He had been trained in theology. He had taken vows of mercy. And he waded through the blood of murdered civilians and saw in it the hand of the Almighty. When the killing stopped, 2 days later, the Crusaders walked barefoot to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and gave thanks to God. They had liberated Jerusalem. That was their word, liberation. The population to whom it had been home was dead. The pivot, measured, the weight of what follows in the contrast. The silence in 1099 was the silence of death. 88 years later, the same walls would produce a different silence. 1187, the 4th of July, 1187. The Horns of Hattin. In the worst military disaster in the history of the Crusader kingdoms, Saladin's army annihilated the combined forces of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The king was captured. The true cross, the most sacred relic in the Christian world, was taken. The army that had defended the Latin kingdoms for nearly 90 years ceased to exist in a single afternoon.
So over the next 3 months, Saladin moved through the Crusader kingdoms with a discipline that was itself a form of message. City after city, he offered terms before siege: surrender and live, resist and face the consequences. Most cities surrendered. Their populations were spared. The message was consistent. This was not 1100. This was not the Crusaders. By late September, Saladin stood before the walls of Jerusalem. Inside, Balian of Ibelin, the last major Crusader noble remaining, had a garrison so small it barely deserved the name. 1,000 men to defend a city of 60,000. The city's population, Frankish Christians who had been born in the East, who had lived in Jerusalem their entire lives, knew what the Crusaders had done in 1099. They knew the precedent, and they were terrified that the precedent would be applied to them. Balian sent a message to Saladin requesting terms. Saladin's initial response was brutally direct. He referenced the massacre of 1099. He said he would take the city as the Franks had taken it, by storm, by sword. Balian countered with a threat of his own. If Saladin refused terms, the Christian garrison would destroy the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and every Muslim prisoner they held. They would kill their own families before surrendering them. Saladin would conquer a city of ashes. Saladin agreed to terms. And here, in the documented details of those terms, is the mirror that changes everything. Every Christian resident of Jerusalem was given 40 days to raise a ransom. 10 dinars per man, 5 per woman, 1 per child. Those who paid could leave with their possessions, escorted by Saladin's soldiers, for their protection. Those who could not pay, and thousands could not, were not killed. They were not enslaved. Saladin's brother, Al-Adil, requested 1,000 of the unredeemed as a personal gift and immediately freed them. Saladin freed every elderly person who could not pay. When Balian pleaded for the rest, Saladin opened the gates. The unredeemed poor walked out, free, alive, carrying nothing but their lives. The restoration, the parallel to the desecration. Saladin entered Jerusalem and went directly to the Temple Mount. He cleaned the Dome of the Rock with rose water. He restored Al-Aqsa to a functioning mosque. The call to prayer sounded from its minaret for the first time in 88 years. He posted guards at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, not to loot it, but to protect it. Christian pilgrims were guaranteed access. You have just seen the same city taken by 2 different armies. One destroyed it, one let everyone leave. If this comparison changes how you think about the word conquest, this channel shows you the comparisons that the official narratives cannot survive. Subscribe. Baha ad-Din ibn Shaddad, Saladin's biographer, who was present, recorded the Sultan's reflection. He said Saladin had considered replicating what the Franks had done. But mercy is more becoming to us. 6 words. The difference between 1099 and 1187. The silence in 1187 was the silence of a city whose population had been allowed to leave alive. The same walls, the same gates, a different choice. Moral. Here is the mirror. Hold it up. Look at both images. 1099. Jerusalem taken by Europeans. The population massacred. The synagogue burned. The Temple Mount soaked in blood. The chaplain called it God's work. 1187. Jerusalem taken by Saladin. The population evacuated. The churches protected. The Dome of the Rock cleaned with rose water. The Sultan called it justice. The Crusaders' official name for their conquest was the Liberation. Saladin's was the Conquest. The one who killed everyone called it a liberation. The one who let everyone live called it a conquest.
There is an entire history of the world concealed in the gap between those two words.
The analysis, the evidence doing the work. There is a persistent assumption in Western historical education that the Crusades were a conflict between two equally violent civilizations, that both sides committed atrocities, that war is war, and all armies behave the same way when walls fall. The documented record of 1099 and 1187, placed side by side, sourced from both Christian and Muslim chronicles, cross-referenced and verified, disproves this assumption. This is not a claim that Islam is inherently peaceful or Christianity inherently violent. Saladin executed Templar and Hospitaller prisoners at Hattin. Richard the Lionheart, who admired Saladin publicly, massacred 2,700 Muslim prisoners at Acre 4 years later. The history is not morally simple, but the specific, documented comparison of these two conquests, the same city, the same military situation, two different outcomes, proves one thing beyond dispute. Atrocity is a choice, not a fate, not an inevitability, not the unavoidable consequence of military victory. A choice, made by specific leaders in specific moments for specific reasons that can be documented and analyzed. The treatment of conquered populations, the treatment of civilians after a city falls, a territory is occupied, a war is won, remains the most honest measure of what a civilization actually values. More honest than its scriptures, more honest than its speeches, more honest than its self-description. What you do with power when no one can stop you is the only reliable evidence of who you are. Two gates, two armies, two choices. The documented record is clear. What you do with it is yours. If the documented record matters, subscribe. New stories every week. This is how we got here.